Hey everyone, and welcome back to another King Arthur Legends Rise video. So in today's video, guys, we are going to be talking about Master of the Apocalypse. This is where you get your tomes to level up the Relic levels. This ends up being a very, very important item, and I think they're much easier to get than Master of Death. And what I mean by that is they seem to be more frequently dropped. Not to say that this boss is easier. I'm saying that the frequency of these tome drops and the quantity of them seems much higher than the talismans. And maybe that's by design. But we are going to talk about this boss because farming these ends up being extremely important. All right. So we're going to go over all of the mechanics, the heroes that are best used in this position, and all of that. But I do want to first get the elephant out of the room and talk about this team. Okay? This team, yes, this is an extremely easy farmable team. It does it in, less than 3 minutes on auto. Yes, I get it. It's all legendaries. It has Bedivere. It has Gillian. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. I'm going to discuss the mechanics of this boss so you can throw in different members of your squad and still beat this stage, even on level 10. I'm sick and tired of seeing comments like if you don't have Bedivere, you should just, quit the game. It's not true. This guy, yes, he is the best damage dealer in the game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, you don't need him to clear these stages. He just does it faster. He makes it easier, all of those things. But you can 100% do it without him. And maybe we'll show that. I think we can show that. I can certainly just replace him with somebody like Kay or Cormac or Clarissan, or literally you can fire Rosier. There's so many different options. You do not need Bedivere in that slot. Gillian, she's a little tougher to replace, but certainly doable. And then there is a replacement for Guinevere. Morgan, you should never replace. You get it for free anyway, so no one can complain about Morgan. All right, so let's talk about the mechanics of this boss. Then we're going to talk about the best teams. So the key things to know about this boss on both stages is that he puts up damage over time. So he puts up burns, he puts up poisons, and all of his attacks do crazy amounts of damage if you can't remove them. So you need to bring in someone that has DOT removal. That's key. He does have a little bit of abnormal status, and he has abnormal status in a different way as well. So the first one is fear. This is something that we've seen on Serenos on the other sealed temple stage, right? For the talismans. So he does have a little bit of fear and abnormal status. And then he also, on this first stage, because he's got 2 stages, at the very beginning of the battle, he will end up eating somebody. But if you have members or heroes that can put up abnormal status immunity, this is treated as an abnormal status. So he has abnormal status in 2 ways, and those are the 2 ways. One thing to note on this person, on this boss, is he does not have attack gauge decrease immunity. So if you have heroes like Morgan on her skill 2, she has the ability to reduce the attack gauge of the boss. Most bosses like this in the game have a very easy trajectory to beat them. If you can just control their attack gauge, you won't have to worry really about most of their mechanics. But this is understanding the boss, and if people don't have that cheese ability, we can have other options, to deal with this boss. And then the last thing is a damage dealer. You want a damage dealer. You need to eventually kill this boss, or you're just going to get overwhelmed. All right, so those are the things. Now, I do want to, let's just talk about that first mechanic. So let's say we bring in a team like this. We're just bringing in essentially all damage dealers just to prove a point, and then we will get out of here. Let's bring in Irrit. Okay, so when you first start this battle, the boss will go in and he will eat 3 of your team members. There's a way around this, and we'll talk about it, but he eats 3 of your team members. Now, he's got a couple different, checkpoints here. Each checkpoint, if you get him below this, he will waste his turn using a skill called spit up or something. Oh, indigestion, where he will spit up one random ally. So if you get him below this, he will end up spitting up one of our heroes. So hopefully we can do it on the next round before he kills us. Okay, so we just got through it, so now he's going to waste his turn and spit up somebody. So ingestion. All right, so now he has spit up our Rosier and our Bedivere. So if we were to get him below this again, then we can go in and get another team member. Because we don't really have good team synergy and whatever, we're just going to die. Okay. So yeah, there is a way around this, and this is something called abnormal status immunity. There's only 2 people in the entire game right now that provide this. The first one is the most apparent, which is Guinevere. So whenever you use Guinevere, you go in, everybody gets abnormal status except her, so he always ends up eating her. Sometimes he misses because it's like 3 out of the 4 that he eats, and on this specific case, he was choosing to eat all 3 of them, but they had abnormal status immunity because of Guinevere, so now things just got way easier. So that's one way around that. The other hero is Bodwin. So Bodwin is a rare hero that you can choose to use over Guinevere, and he is right here. So if you look at his stats and his abilities, he has a passive on his second passive that says at the start of the battle, grants abnormal status immunity to a random ally for 1 turn. So if you bring him in, you also have the ability to save at least 1 of your additional heroes. All right, so in this case, he ended up only eating our Rosier. So if you don't have Guinevere, you can certainly use Bodwin to get around this mechanic, because the nice thing is in cases like this, where he ate 1 hero, now all we have to do is get him past that first HP marker, and we'll get back our entire team. So there you go. So now we have our entire team back, and we can basically go in and start smashing this boss again, right? So that's the first mechanic. While we're here, the other thing that I want to talk about, you see that he used these skills, right? He used this skill, and he put up all of these DOTs on our team. It's for burn and poison, poison, and then fear, and then burn and poison. He has all of these moves that inflict a ton of damage if you have DOT, because he does some type of explosion effect. So any of these things here, you see he attacks these people for 200% of his attack and then 40% of his defense, and then he triggers burn explosion. This one is poison explosion, so he detonates all of the poison effects. You're going to watch, you're going to see how much damage this actually does whenever he activates this. It essentially one-shots all of your, it'll essentially one-shot the hero that it targets. Okay, so this one targeted 2 people, but it just so happened to target a defense hero. So he's a little bulkier than most. And then Rosier actually had 1 stack of DOT with the fear, which is abnormal status. If it would have hit Irrit or if it would have hit Bodwin, we would have been dead. So it's extremely important that you clear the DOTs, and that's what we're going to talk about now whenever we're talking about our heroes. But those are the things that you need to worry about, okay? That abnormal status at the beginning, DOT removal, and then how we can mitigate the amount of turns that the boss has. So first things first, we have already talked about Guinevere, and we've already talked about Bodwin getting around that key abnormal status where he eats your team members at the beginning. I don't think either of those heroes are really interchangeable. You have to either use Bodwin or you have to use Guinevere. All right, so we'll put Bodwin here just for this instance, and then we'll talk about the other team members that could possibly fill in. The nice thing is Bodwin has the ability to fill a couple roles here. So we're talking about DOT removal. Let's talk about some of the heroes that can remove DOTs. So the first one is Aine. Aine is a great support hero. We've talked about her in length with her own dedicated video. On her skill 2, she has a 100% chance to remove 1 debuff and 1 DOT from each ally, with also the possibility of granting each ally attack increase 2. This is fantastic for your damage dealers. It solves one of the problems with removing debuffs. However, the problem is in this case, all Aine is doing is removing a debuff. So even though she does fill that role, she's only fulfilling 1 role. So that's a bit of a bummer, but it is there. One thing to mention, she does have defense increase, effect resistance increase, and DOT immunity, which is a huge buff on her skill 3. However, because it's skill 3, it does cost 3 vigor. The likelihood of keeping this up full time is going to be difficult, and it's not going to allow the rest of your heroes to do, their preferred skills. So Aine is, I think, a subpar DOT remover in this instance, but she is an option. Now, Clementine, I think, is fantastic in this role because she fills a bunch of roles, but the caveat is you do need her Frost Relic. On her Frost Relic, because her baseline relic is the Fire Relic, her Fire Relic removes 1 debuff on her skill 2, which also heals. But on her Frost Relic, on her skill 2, she has a 50% chance to remove 1 DOT from each ally. So it is a lower percentage. But if you go into Clementine here and you look at her Frost Relic, this can actually be skilled up to dispel 3 DOTs. Even though it's 50% chance, you do have the ability to remove 3 DOTs. And you saw there, Crom Crouch was putting up 2 DOTs on 1 skill. So even if you get this skilled up 1 time, this is a fantastic ability. The reason why I like Clementine is she does 2 things already really well. She heals your team, and she removes a DOT. So she's a great healer in this case. But she also has the ability to reduce attack gauge. So she is filling 3 roles if you have her Frost Relic. So her first passive is whenever she uses skill 2, she has a 100% chance to decrease the target's attack gauge by 30%. This is random. However, the first wave of Crom Crouch, it is just him. He does have the ability to summon other minions. However, there are ways around that. He ends up eating them, all of these different things. I don't want to get into that too much. But then she also heals on this ability. If you skill this 1 time, it ends up being just a 1-turn cooldown. So every other turn, you are going to be getting this ability, which is huge. She also has this ability whenever you use her skill 3. She charges her attack gauge by 100%, but triggers this great ability called Future to Come, where she reduces the attack gauge of somebody by 40%. This is a really great ability. It can come in clutch. So Clementine on her Frost Relic ends up being able to do 3 things. She removes DOTs, she heals your team, and then she also has some of the attack gauge decrease. So 3 rolls there, which is great. Now Bodwin actually has DOT removal, but you need his Storm Relic. I don't have his Storm Relic, but on his Storm Relic, his skill 2, he has a 100% chance to remove a DOT from all allies. So he's filling 2 roles then too. He's getting rid of the abnormal status at the very beginning, which makes that first fight a whole lot easier. And he's then filling a second role if you have his Storm Relic to also remove DOTs. He does have some other application in here as well on his first passive, because the boss does have abnormal status with the fear. So his other passives aren't completely irrelevant. The other thing is the second wave boss does have a charged attack, and if you inflict some kind of abnormal status on him, it will interrupt it. So Bodwin with the Frost Relic will also remove DOTs. So that's great. Now, your best in class for DOT and healing is Isolde. So she's much more reliable with the DOT removals than Clementine, but she does not provide the attack gauge decrease like Clementine. So you're replacing dependability with Isolde versus efficiency with Clementine. But Isolde's abilities, anytime she triggers a recovery of HP, she removes 1 DOT. Now, you can actually skill this up to anytime she heals, she will dispel 2 DOTs at a 90% rate. This is huge. Your team will essentially never have DOTs on them if you have Isolde fully skilled up. She also has this amazing second passive where when you use skill 2, it also removes a DOT from all allies, and that can also be 2 turns. But this is on a 2-turn cooldown. Oh, sorry, not 2 turns, 2 DOTs. And you can reduce that to a 2-turn cooldown. But this first passive is just really solid because it doesn't have any cooldown. And on her baseline Relic, she does have a recovery over time as well as a small heal. That can be boosted up to 2 turns instead of 1. So this can kind of spiral. And then last but not least is another legendary, and it's one of the newer heroes, which was Vivian. So Vivian was absolutely great in Gorgos, but she's fantastic here too. Her skill 2, where she converts all of the allies' DOTs to recovery over time, like you never have to worry about DOTs. But that's really all she offers is DOT removal and healing. And that might be all you need. If you have her chivalry up, she does have the capability to reduce cooldowns. So that could be something on, like a Morgan or something of that nature. So she is also another fantastic option for DOT removal. So that's DOT removal. All right. Next is attack gauge decrease. You have your normal heroes that you see in this slot, and this is kind of why people get frustrated with Gillian, is because she just does a bunch of things. It's similar to like Clementine, except Gillian is way more consistent. So she boosts the attack gauge of your heroes while also having the ability to reduce the attack gauge on enemy heroes. She also has healing, and then on her relics, she also has attack gauge decrease as well as healing. So she just does so much stuff. It's really hard to replace her. You can, but that's why that first team I showed you is just so consistent, is because you have the best damage dealer, you have the best healer with attack gauge decrease and attack gauge boost, with your damage amplifier with more attack gauge decrease. It's just, it makes it so simple. Morgan, everyone knows about her. This skill 2 on her Fire Relic, being able to reduce the attack gauge by 10% on each hit up to 30% is amazing. It's way too good in boss fights that don't have attack gauge decrease immunity. And we all know about her crazy skill for defense decrease and then damage taken too. No surprise there. I've already talked about Clementine. If you don't have her Frost Relic, her Fire Relic has better attack gauge decrease abilities than her Frost Relic. So her Frost Relic does have an attack gauge decrease by 70%. However, the rate is baseline 50%, where the Fire one is actually 90%. And this ties in to her passive ability on that skill 3. So you have the ability to reduce the attack gauge by 70% at an 80% clip rate, but you can get it up to 100% if you fully skill her. So Clementine's great there, Morgan, Gillian. Claudis does have attack gauge decrease. However, I don't think she hits very hard, and all she brings is attack gauge decrease. I don't think it's good enough. And then the last person that I think has some real merit, I just don't have him built, is Ban. So Ban's Storm Relic on his skill 2 has a 50% chance to reduce the target's attack gauge by 5%. However, you can skill it up to a 70% chance at a 15% attack gauge reduction. I think this is good enough because you can get Ban cooking real quick. He charges his attack gauge by 30% every other turn if you get this skill fully leveled up. And if you have him Chivalry 8, I have him 10, he grants himself attack speed increase 1 for 2 turns every 2 turns, but you can also get this every other turn. And he gives himself increased critical damage and drain, which is really big. So the thing that I like about Ban and the Storm Relic is he does have attack gauge decrease along with being a damage dealer, so he can fill 2 roles. That's basically your options for the attack gauge decreases. And then damage dealers. Damage dealers, guys, it's no surprise that, Bedivere is the best one. If you have them, you should use them. If you don't have them, you can certainly clear this with tons of options, right? You can use Kay. Kay is a fantastic damage dealer. She's also very easy to build because on her Storm Relic, she gives herself critical strike rate increase 2 for 2 turns. That means that you only need to build her with 40% crit rate to get good damage. She'll be critting every time because she's using her skill 2 all the time. Irrit is a fantastic damage healer. If you have her, you can certainly use her over Bedivere. Clarissan is good after her rework. Frost Relic Cormac is good. Fire Relic Rosier is good. So all of these heroes are options. Okay, so let's put together a sample team. All right, now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this team right here, simple, clear. But what everyone needs to remember is this is stage 10. It's going to take you some time to get here. And by that time, you will have summoned some legendary heroes. So the chances of you having one of these 3 by the time you're here, I think will be high. So it's okay to use them, right? You don't need to not use Bedivere if you have Bedivere. He does make everything easier, but you don't need him. So if you don't summon him, there are plenty of options to go around. All right, so I think the best thing for me to do is to take teams like this and show you the replacements for them. So in Bedivere's slot, what you can do is you can use Cormac. Cormac slots in here with his Frost Relic. He does great damage. If you don't have Cormac's Frost Relic, you can use Rosier's Fire Relic. She has the highest damage multipliers on this skill. I think for any rare, it's really big, especially if you're a single target. I think Cormac combined might have more damage multipliers, but he needs like a condition met with multiple heroes, and that won't always be the case. in this instance. K, everyone has K. You can certainly use her in her Storm Relic. She does great damage as well. So she's the easiest replacement here. Irrit, fantastic. Tristan's okay. He just does burst damage, so I wouldn't say he's like amazing. Merlin can actually do a decent amount of damage as well. Yeah. And then you also have this little fairy girl. I'm actually going to make a video on her soon once I get her fully awakened, because I think she's really cool with Ain. I kind of like that pairing, but that's beside the point. Okay, so in this case, let's do K. All right, we'll go through here. We'll do a sample run, and I'll show you that Bedivere isn't needed if you have K. And then the next run, we'll do another team, and we'll sub out somebody for, Gillian.